So the second author we've read for this week is Slavoj Žižek, who is, like Judith Butler, an extraordinarily prolific and provocative and interesting philosophical voice. And like Judith Butler, has become a philosopher of the world, really has audiences all over the world, in and outside of academia. Slavoj Žižek has written a lot about popular culture, and so his words and his shtick, I could call it, really, that is his performance, resonate widely because of his attentiveness to non-academic forms of communication and his penchant for incisive readings of what we thought of as very familiar forms, whether that would be Hitchcock or other popular cinema, and or his wonderful use of humor to instruct us on some really complex and difficult issues. Butler has recently seen herself in the legacy of Foucault's notion of critique, and she has paid extraordinary debts to deconstruction. Slavoj Žižek, as he says often, is a card-carrying Lacanian. That is, he has learned a lot from Jacques Lacan, the great French psychoanalyst and theorist, who started off being very much influenced not only by Freud, but also by the Surrealists, and then by Alexander Kojève, a Hegelian we may have mentioned before in this class, and Kojève's notion of a master-slave dialectic from Hegel. And Lacan went on to write very enigmatic and powerful works about how language, the unconscious, and desire intersect, form a constellation of forces that we could never fully understand, but that structure our lives, our subjectivity, our fantasy, and our actions. Žižek begins from that, and I think one of the first things to do is just to get a sense of Žižek in addition to the reading which we've assigned. And we've just assigned a small essay from the London Review of Books called You May, which is really the imperative of you must enjoy. I'd like you to look at some film clips that you can see on YouTube, and we'll post some links here. And if you have a chance to look at the film Žižek, which is about 70-minute film, it gives you a sense of his ideas, but also of his way of thinking as a person moving through the world. I think very compelling analyst of contemporary culture.
This is your last chance. After this, there is no turning back. You take the blue pill, the story ends. You wake up in your bed and believe whatever you want to believe. You take the red pill, you stay in Wonderland, and I show you how deep the rabbit hole goes.
But the choice between the blue and the red pill is not really a choice between illusion and reality. Of course, Matrix is a machine for fictions, but these are fictions which already structure our reality. If you take away from our reality the symbolic fictions that regulate it, you lose reality itself. I want a third pill. So what is the third pill? Definitely not some kind of transcendental pill which enables a fake fast food religious experience, but a pill that would enable me to perceive not the reality behind the illusion, but the reality in illusion itself. If something gets too traumatic, too violent, even too filled in with enjoyment, it shatters the coordinates of our reality We have to fictionalize it.
Anyway, for our purposes, we are focusing on this text, and Zizek in here talks about modernism as a practice that that orients itself around an empty spot where we thought God was. That is, that for modernism, there was this the notion that God is missing, that there was this spot where God, or the ordering principle, or the sovereign of the world, we used to think that was there, and then what modernism discovers is that that's gone, that it's God is dead, or there is no ideal, or as Zizek puts it on page 43 of the text we've assigned, that the thing is lacking, that the machine of the world, our machine of the universe, revolves around an emptiness. And he says the postmodernist reversal, this is on page 43, the postmodernist reversal shows the thing itself as the incarnated, materialized emptiness. In other words, rather than just thinking that God is dead, postmodernism thinks that the dead God, the materialized emptiness, is this terrifying object that nonetheless structures our very existence. This sounds awfully cryptic, and it is awfully cryptic. For Zizek, what happens is that we have a notion of what he calls, following Lacan, the big other, that is some ordering principle of the universe, some force that determines who we are and what we do, and that in postmodernism we realize that the force that determines what we are and who we are and what we do, that force is itself materialized emptiness, that there is a power of absence that controls us, that defines our existence. It's not as if we can be free by just realizing that there is no wizard behind the curtain. You know, remember the Wizard of Oz, that you realize, oh, there's no wizard behind the curtain. Or it's not that we become free when we realize that there is, that God is dead, as Nietzsche said. We don't become free there. We just, we realize that the force that structures us is a force of emptiness. On page 51, he puts it this way: by the mere act of speaking, we suppose the existence of the big other, the guarantor of meaning. This is on page 51. When we engage in a language game, when we engage in an act of speaking, we acknowledge that there are a set of rules that guarantee meaning. And that if we didn't act as if there were a set of rules that guaranteed meaning, we would be crazy. We would be, as he says, psychotic. Believing there is a code to be cracked, Zizek writes, is of course much the same as believing in the existence of the big other. That is, if you think there's a code behind it all, if you think there's a conspiracy, or you think that there's a force controlling all things, what you are doing is believing that there is a author of a structure that gives meaning to our everyday lives. And for Zizek, this is a fantasy, an illusion. And for him, instead, what he's interested in is the ways in which what looks like prohibition actually gives rise to desire, and what looks like desire actually becomes a form of prohibition. This is the Zizek's typical move. That is, what he tends to do is to emphasize that what looks like X is really Y, and what pretends to be Y is really Z, and that and he does this in a way that acknowledges our first perceptions of the situation, but then reverses those perceptions.
But let's say you have this so-called tolerant postmodern father. What he will tell you is the following. You know how much your grandmother loves you, but nonetheless, you should only visit her if you really want to. Now, every child who is not an idiot, and they are not idiots, know that this apparent free choice secretly contains an even much stronger order. It's not only you have to visit your grandmother, but you have to like it.
I'm beginning to like this book all the more.
That's one example of how apparent tolerance, choice, and so on can conceal a much stronger order.
So we should go back to more like the dad that just says, "Because I said so."
Absolutely. It's more honest.
On page 7, he's talking here about what he calls sometimes the postmodern father. He says the old-fashioned father would say, we're going to Grandma's house on Sunday. We're going to Grandma's house on Sunday, and you're coming. You want to go play baseball? Too bad. You're coming to Grandma's house. The postmodern father, seems to be very permissive, so he's very gentle, says, oh, we're going to Grandma's house on Sunday, and you know how much Grandma loves you. You know how much I want you to be there with Grandma because she loves you, and I know you'll make the right decision, and you'll go to Grandma's house with us on Sunday. And for Zizek, this apparently more tolerant, more permissive, gentler force is much more oppressive, much more pernicious, because what it's really saying is, you will want to go to Grandma's house. The first father, the old-fashioned father, says, you're going to go to Grandma's house because I'm the father, and you're going to listen to me. Whereas the second one, under the guise of tolerance, under the guise of permissiveness, what the second father is saying is, you will have the desire I want you to have. Because I want not just to control your behavior, but I want to control your desire. So in a permissive society, there is a different form of oppression. In a permissive society, Zizek writes, there's a different kind of transgression. This is from page 7 of the reading for this week. In a permissive society, the rigidly codified authoritarian master-slave relationship becomes transgressive. The master-slave relationship becomes a transgressive relationship. This paradox or reversal is the proper topic of psychoanalysis. Psychoanalysis did not deal with the authoritarian father who prohibits enjoyment, but with the obscene father who enjoins it and thus renders you impotent or frigid. The unconscious is not secret resistance to the law, but the law itself. So for Zizek, the obscene father is this postmodern father who makes you want to do something rather than just prohibit you from doing something you originally wanted to do.